Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Advocate Health Advisors AHA podcast. Things you need to know in an industry that you must love. So, today we're going to, as we mentioned last week, we're going to change the format just a little bit. We've had a lot of listeners request the specific topics they like learning. The GLP-1 conversation was a big hit, as was the PDP changes happening. And so, I want to kind of continue on that venue. And so today we're going to talk about why you should not sell your book of business. So, contrary to popular belief and all the emails and phone calls you get out there with everybody seemingly selling their book of business or their agency, which, private equity has moved in, I would say private equity is maybe moving in for their own reasons. And we want to encourage you to think about the other side of that coin and why not to sell. So, we'll start off with you, Jennifer, and just kind of with the agents you've seen and some of the sales that we've seen. What would you say is, it doesn't have to be the number one reason, but a top reason that you may not want to sell your book of business?
Well, there's no better investment in your own self, right? And there's a lot of people right now coming in and talking to agents that still want to stay in the business because there's kind of like two different ways to look at this. Are you want to get out because you're ready to retire? You just don't even want to be in the business anymore? Or are you just taking an opportunity that somebody might be presenting to you because they want to own some piece of what you're doing? So, one of the things that I've seen recently that I think it's really important to talk about, or I would like to talk about, would be agents that are very successful right now. Maybe it's like, a couple family members, you have like more of an agency, maybe two or three of you guys, you have maybe some bricks and mortar. And I've heard people that are approaching them saying, hey, I want to come in there and I want to buy your agency and I'm going to give you, X number of dollars. And then they're going to pay them some sort of a salary, right? What I wanted to say was just, and you know a lot about this too, Darwin, is just the financial piece of that, right? Like, what does that look like? And so what I think it's important people to understand is if you take that all the way down through the process, you're actually going to make more money staying in the business and working for yourself than you will by getting a big cash upfront amount and then making a, sort of earn out that you have to do and then making some sort of a salary. And if you actually hit the metrics of the that they want you to grow the company to hit these numbers and these amounts that they're throwing at you, they're basically buying you with your own money. Like you would make more money doing that by just staying in business for 18 months or 2 years than you would ever make with what they showed you. But people are in the insurance business to help beneficiaries, and that's what they know. And so it's important for maybe someone else to sort of say, wait a minute, this doesn't, from a financial perspective, this doesn't make sense. It looks like a big number on a piece of paper. It looks like all the money in the world, but you're going to be better off keeping it. So I'll stop there. And I know you probably have a few things that you could add to that too.
Well, I think I could probably talk about why I didn't sell Advocate and don't plan to. That's probably a thought. But before we do that, Jackleen, what about the emotional component? Don't we see a lot of people that just, it seems like the sky is falling and, sometimes you're just at your wit's end. Have you seen that, Jackleen?
Absolutely. I think, it's no secret that, the last couple of annual enrollment periods have been disruptive. And, this one we also expect, some movement and more beneficiaries need help. And I think a lot of, things that we hear from agents about their interest to sell or their concern happens around this time of year, actually. There seems to be a little bit of influx or wave of agents interested in selling their business. And it can be intimidating going into another AEP, especially with some anticipation of disruption or some uncertainty. And so, I would say there, like, don't let your fears run away from you. If there's a disruptive season, it usually means that your clients actually need you more. So it's invaluable that you're actually in that position. Like, you were built for this. It's okay. Like, we're here to help you through that. So AEP is a very important window too. And so I remind agents that, and it goes back to what Jennifer was saying too about, investing in yourself. Like, you're always going to make more on the, on the long-term perspective, just continuing to walk through the AEPs, being of service to your agents. We actually built support systems so agents can stay in the game longer because we know it can be overwhelming, especially for top agents that have to handle both maybe the rewriting of their book and the customer service. we strategically have kept agents in the game longer because we help them on the back end office support, and it really makes a big difference. So you're not in it alone. And so don't throw in the towel. The sky's not falling. And, the goal, I think, for the industry is to stabilize more to moving ahead. So it's going to be great.
Well, thank you for that. And I think you told me you had one agent that wanted like a check in 2 weeks or something, right? It's like,
Yeah,
I'm done.
there's some realistic things agents have to understand too. I would call them red flags, right? So, if you want the upfront cash, you're not really thinking about a transition or succession plan for your book of business to make sure that they're continuing to be served. You're just shopping around for a price. I consider that a red flag immediately. Agents that, we've had the opportunity to work with, we've mapped out these conversations sometimes 1 year, 2 years in advance. It takes months sometimes for these forms to go through for the carrier transition. So there is no immediate payout expectation. You need to put thought, consideration, have a plan, because ultimately you want the clients to be serviced. Having a disruption to the agent of record right before an AEP season is what I would consider a higher risk area. And so all of those should be considered, because we talked about before agents having a succession plan. So that's why it's important. These take time. You need to plan that out. And so a lot of agents now have a plan, whether it's they identified a successor agent or they've talked to advocate about it. But the immediate cash, walking away, it's not a service to anybody.
Yeah. And in full disclosure, I should, announce that Advocate does buy books of business and we do buy agencies. And so, that is a service we provide for people that are, in that, although we discourage them. But occasionally, someone passes away, someone gets sick, there are, conditions that would require that, but that's not our growth strategy. That's just something we do to care for the hardworking agents and agencies. So before I say anything, Jennifer, so if someone sells their book of business, it's just free money after that, right? There's not any work to actually care for the clients after that, is there?
You mean if they stay in the business still and they sell it, or would they just totally
I'm
get
just
out?
saying, when you buy a book of business, doesn't someone still have to care for the client? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah,
we can't
I
have
think
orphan clients that get no care, no service.
I agree, and I think sometimes when people come in there and they see money on a piece of paper, I know we've referred to that as a paper tiger, the beneficiary's name even doesn't even come up. I mean, that's why this business is here, is to care for beneficiaries, and so that life needs to be taken care of, and the revenue, the renewals that come in to an agent, every single month are there for the customer service and support that's being provided to that individual member, and that still needs to happen. And so I think that's part of the thing that gets missed. You have to have some sort of a plan for that. Otherwise, it's just going to be gone. It's somebody else is going to find that member, the member's going to find someone else. So a true succession planning has that in mind with who's going to care for that life. And then whoever's caring for that life, they should get credit for the work that they're doing, right? So that sort of financial piece has to be considered in the however that transaction is going to be. For those who want to stay in the business, it's my opinion. I mean, everybody has an opinion that there's no better way than to own your own business, and the work that you do with your agency to care for your clients and the effort that you put into that personal independent business that you have the success is direct to the work that you put into it, right? So if you were to say, well, if someone comes to you and says, I'm going to give you all this money and I want to have a piece of your company, first of all, they can't do it themselves. So that should be a flag right there. They're coming to you. You've done all that work. I don't, if you took $100,000, let's say, as a payment to sort of sell your interest in your own book of business and company, you've got to put that money somewhere, right? So what are you going to do? Put it in a money market account and make what, 3 to 5% interest or whatever? Are you going to put in the stock market? That over time is about 8%. Sometimes it's been better, sometimes it's been worse, but over time, over the years, you chat GPT that, it's like 8%, I think they say. So if you want to really make the best return, it's by investing directly into your own company. And there's a lot higher percent you can make if you're just talking about the money. But there's
No,
also
but
like,
wait.
yeah,
If I sell it for 100, I'm not going to have 100 to put in the stock market, am I?
well, that's a really good point. Yes, Darwin, you're not, because guess what? You're going to pay capital gains on that money, which is 20%. If you live in a state that has state taxes, then you're going to pay state taxes. Some of those can be what, 10%? depending on what state you're in. And there's also transaction fees for that, right? So you're typically working with a company that's going to help you. So when you're all said and done, you're probably going to end up with like what, maybe 60, 70% of whatever they're offering you on that piece of paper. So the number looks big, but you just math model it
That's
out.
assuming they give you all cash, right? Not monopoly money like some.
Yeah, like yeah. Well, sometimes the offer might be this huge number. They might say, "Oh, your company's worth, $2 million," and that might be like, "But we're going to pay you in stock, and we're going to pay you in cash." But then the cash is going to have all of those percents coming out, where you don't actually make that much, and the stock is not something that you can go buy anything with. You're just holding it for this sort of chance. They can say whatever that's worth, and they're saying, "Hey, that's gonna be worth so much money later," but, they give a lot of that
It
stock out,
might
and it
be,
might
but
be, who knows?
it not be.
We don't know.
Look at the call center stocks that went public.
Yeah,
GoCo got delisted now, right? And the other ones are down about 95%. So there's some risk
right.
there.
There's definitely risk. It's just an unknown, and so, again, if people are coming at you and shopping for you, well, then they want something from you, and they wanna get into your business, so just something to always just think about when you have that, and I always just like to have those conversations, and I don't think there's a lot of organizations or people out there just talking about why you should be investing in your own business and don't sell, I think there's more people out there saying, "Come sell me your book of business," or, "Come sell your company to me," so I think, it's good to just be a advocate for what that alternative could be and what that looks like.
Well, have you seen some success stories? I can think of, families where the father passed it to the daughter, the parent to the child. I've seen top brokers, buy in and, rise up, and I've seen it transition that way. You think that's a viable option?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, and again, we've had like father son, we've had, father daughter, and the child basically takes over, the business, and they learn and they do. And again, these, like to Jacqueline's point, these conversations happen early. And so you can have a plan. We can help out, map out that plan. You can work with, people outside of the business to map that plan out. And again, it's the golden goose. Your agency is the golden goose. It's producing, it's a happy thing. You're doing a really good deed for beneficiaries, and you're making a really good living, and there's money there to be had for the work you're doing. We can do well by helping others. I just am of the opinion, why give that to somebody else that's not in the business? It's just going to turn around and use that to pay back some private equity investors. Most of these groups are VC or whatever. They're borrowing a lot of money to try to get themselves into this business and get something out of it and do a return. In Medicare Advantage and in this in general, right now, it's a tough industry. It has a lot of pressures. We all have to be doing our part. And whatever financial pieces are out there, I think it's better served that those are invested into real resources that can help agents and ultimately the beneficiary, rather than pulling that money out of the system for some investor. And that's just my opinion. I'm not saying that all private equity and venture capital is bad. I'm just simply saying it's something to consider, and it's the other side of that coin. And no one's saying it. And I'm glad that we're talking about it. I'm passionate about it. So
And of course, we have a little bit of an Easter egg here. Jennifer, have you seen any models where you took the long run, 3, 5, 7, even 10 years? How does that look for a person that sells or doesn't sell? What does that look like to the new owner?
yes, I have. And we've run those math models out to help people with the decision making process. And this is really interesting. This was a real life example where, you know, they wanted to buy into the business. The person's going to have to stay on. They wanted them to make an increase in their revenue every year by, a certain percentage. And then that next year, another percentage. So, that's compounding onto the new number, right? And it's hard to grow once you've grown at, like, let's say 10 or 15%, to then take that new number and grow another 10 or 15%, right? So people don't always think
But
about
you
that.
can do it.
You can do it, but it's more difficult the larger that your book of business becomes to grow at those kinds of rates, right? If you don't have a large one, it's easier to grow it
Yeah.
faster. But the point here is just that if you actually do what they say that you have to do in order to hit these certain targets and to get the rest of the money that they're offering you on this paper tiger, by the time you do that, you will have actually made more money if you owned your own business and stayed in it than if you sold it. And it's compoundingly incredible. And when I saw, like, I think it was like $1 million they were offering or something, crazy points to try to hit the other money to maybe make 4 million by the end of 5 years. But if you ran that out where they kept their business, they would have made $5 million. And if they stayed for another like couple more years after that, at those new growth rates, they were going to make like 15 million. And so it's incredible the difference in the math
Yeah.
model of
Yeah, it
giving.
snowballs, right? It's exponential. So I think it's worth just saying, although a lot of money up front sounds good and it's very understandable where that's appealing. But a couple of tips are number one, overall businesses over time, the majority of people don't get the earnout. Now some do, but they call it an earnout. So if you got 10, 20, 30% at risk, that's at risk. Also, if you just think about the long term, right? That's where the power comes in, 5 and 10 years. You got to believe in the market, you got to believe in yourself, but I mean the demographics are there to support that. And a lot of discounted cash flow models just end at 5 years, but if you think about growing at 15% a year, then you'll double in 5 years. If you grow at 23, 24% a year, you'll double in 3 years. And if you grow at like 10%, then you'll grow and double in 7 years ish. So when you play the math out, you can see where if each year you take the profit, invest the profit into another asset class, right? Thinking about your own business as an asset and whatever you like, right? Multifamily real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever your risk tolerance is or your desires as an investor, just keep that out. Or I know a lot of people that want to transfer wealth. They want to give their daughter money for a wedding. They want to give their loved ones a house. So you don't have to sell your business to do that. In fact, you could just take all the profit. You could pay for the wedding. You could buy them a house. Each year you've got some amount of money and you could just keep, gifting that and doing things for them. And then at the end of 5 years or even 10, you've got a substantially bigger business and you've helped substantially more people. And I think that the power of the growth and the understanding isn't intuitive. You can only understand it if you get a pencil and paper and write it out or an Excel spreadsheet. And that's when you really understand, why they're buying and why they want you to sell. For me, I've seen people retire. I've got friends now that I went to high school and college with that are retiring and grandparents. And so, you know, I think about this a couple of ways. Number one, I see a lot of people that find happiness from doing something meaningful, right? So Arthur Brooks wrote a book with Oprah that talks about, setting and achieving goals as a component of happiness, like, hitting our numbers, having family and friends, like community, right? So Thanksgiving isn't just a meal. Thanksgiving is special because you've got loved ones around or people that you care about. And then the third one's a purpose, right? Being connected to something higher than yourself. So, after my military service, I find, purpose in serving the Medicare beneficiaries, especially the more vulnerable ones. And so I see people that have sold their businesses that I don't want to say they're bored, but they're certainly not as fulfilled, I think, as they thought. And so, being a part of something, you don't want to be burned out and not having a good life, but you can use advocate or employees. There's a way to structure that so that you can kind of have the work life balance that you want. And so for me, I find it just fulfilling as number one. Number two, I can control what I do at advocate, right? So I've got the money over time. I've always lived a very conservative life. I've put money into real estate and into the stock market because I am nervous to have all my eggs in one basket. But I was able to, over time, do some other things so that, I could sleep better at night in the event that the government did do something crazy, which for 21 years they've always said they would. But so far, so good. I'll knock on wood there. But you know what? I can't, no matter how hard I try to pick a stock, I can't make, Microsoft do any better, right? I can't control Microsoft. Some years it's flat and does nothing. Lately it's gone up a lot, but you can't control that. But I can control Advocate. If I want Advocate to do better, I can come in earlier, I can stay later, I can work on a Saturday. And if I don't, if I want time off, I can have wonderful people like you or Jackleen that covers for me when I go on my family vacation, right? So I can bring in good people to lighten my load, and so I can surge when I should surge, but ultimately I can control that. Also, I would say third is that I like being independent. I worked at IBM, I worked in the Army, I worked at AT&T, and I like being an entrepreneur. I like being my own boss. I think people that are sort of entrepreneurs and business owners as such are a little bit different and they like that autonomy. And so working for somebody else just doesn't appeal to me. I like serving others and serving beneficiaries, but that's different. And then I would say I can only make, like you said, 5%. I can make some money in corporate bonds or I can make some money. The stock market goes up and down quite a bit. So, I mean, I do like that because I've been in it for a long time. But if I want to go buy a tax free municipal bond, I can only get 3 or 4%. And if I run Advocate properly, I can get more than that, right? So not only can I control it, not only am I my own boss, so to speak, which comes with some liability too, right? I don't have anybody to go complain to at the end of the day, but you can actually make a better margin on that, all things considered, because we typically work from home or have a modest office. We don't have big elaborate stabs. We don't have skyscrapers and jet planes and $1 million executives. We're small business. We're frugal. Which is why we're such a tremendous value to the industry, is because you've got this national infrastructure quilted together of brokers and FMOs. That's a shared distribution model that's aligned. And so those are some of the things that I think about. And I guess lastly, because there are more, but lastly, I would say I not only like what I do and who I do it with, I believe that the demographics of the market, some people would say demographics are destiny. So we're literally in a market that is a $5 trillion industry and growing. There's 65 million or so Medicare beneficiaries, growing to 80 million by the end of the year. I mean, by the end of the decade. And after 2030, it doesn't stop. That's the crazy thing, is that from 2030 to 2050, we're going to 100 million. Medicare Advantage is the most viable option. There's some infighting that says Medicare Advantage costs more than original Medicare, and it does, but you get more, right? You get a lower monthly payment or premium. You get better coverage, better because coordinated care is superior to non-coordinated care. So Medicare Advantage is better care. And you've got more things that are included: vision, dental, hearing, and, health plan memberships, things like that. So, it's about $200 a month more. Now, you could argue, I heard a good argument from the former chair of MedPAC, and he said, "Hey, I don't think acupuncture needs to be a benefit. I don't think we can afford $200 a month." And so, I would say the argument might be, do we or don't we want to spend the $200 a month, or what value do we get? We should definitely be seeing what benefits are utilized and the value. But if you do want to reel that back in, again, who's going to help educate the beneficiary? Who's going to help educate the broker? Who's going to make sense? Our distribution channel. So nobody can do what we do as well as we do it, or as efficiently, cost effective as we do it. It absolutely needs to be done. And as long as we keep adding value and, leaning forward in the marketplace, you've got decades and decades of opportunity. And so that's why they want to buy these businesses up, right? They want to get in there as fast as they can. And so I would just say, if you like what you do and you like who you do it with, we can help you sort of alleviate some of the pain. We had a lot of brokers that were going to retire, and then they went on vacation. Jackleen had taken them into the client care team, and instead of getting, 6 and 7 customer service calls a day on vacation, we fielded those calls. And oh my gosh, I think one lady, Christine, came back. She was so refreshed. She goes, "You know what? I was going to retire, but now I'm so energized from my vacation. I'm going to try to break 100 MA sales this year." Right. And so, putting that infrastructure in place and putting those support systems so you can work hard, but you can also take the well earned time off. Those are exciting, fulfilling things. And now she can pass that business on to her daughter one day, but she's going to stay in a few more years. Dr. Oz said if we all just work a few more years longer, we save the country like trillions of dollars or some crazy number, just because the labor market needs people, and slowing down the draw on Social Security is almost like a patriotic act. So anyhow, we're such a great topic, Jennifer. Thank you for recommending it. I'll give it back to you for closing comments, Jennifer, and then Jackleen, and I think we'll wrap it up after that.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you. I enjoyed what you had to say there, Darwin. And I guess at the end of the day, I'll just wrap it up to say that, if you're an agent that really loves what they're doing, there's no better thing than to bet on yourself and to stay in the business and to just get with, a support system that's going to help you improve and continue to do that. If you're an agent that is ready to get out of the business and retire for some reason, then that's a conversation that we can have with you with the successorship program or another agent or finding it and selling a book. That's different. So we're just going to completely get out. That's my recommendation. Otherwise,
Or
you
just
know,
a partnership, right? So we've seen people that sell the business. We saw the folks in Clearwater, right? The owners wanted to exit for health reasons, and they had a team of managers and they had a group and they arranged it so that, and that's common. You see doctors sell their practice to a doctor that works from, like, the accountants do this, like, so it's very common to just kind of keep it in the family. About a third of people that have business don't have family members to pass it on to, right? So this is the biggest transition of wealth in the history of the world. So, having somebody who's been in the business and helped make it successful, a lot of people would be able to transition it to them as a part of their successorship planning.
that's right. Yeah.
And then, oh, we should probably count it up so we
Count it
can
up. There was a
say,
lot. How
but
many
so
reasons is that?
Jacqueline, give me your comments, and then let's do a little tally of, like,
Let's see.
what we think are, the five, or
Yeah,
however many we came up
absolutely.
with.
I think I got 6 is what I'm counting to, and I'll just recap a couple of them because they were so good. I keep hearing a lot about the value of maintaining independence and the benefits that come with that too. Especially, a lot of our agents and agencies are entrepreneurs and they have that spirit too, which is amazing. And then I think the second one is invest in yourself comes with that too. You make more money long term than getting the upfront payment, and you're sort of paying, for that purchase that Jennifer was talking about, which is really insightful. I think I got more insight about that too. I think 3, Darwin mentioned too about, just the fulfillment and the value of what we do. I know a lot of our agents and agencies, like, we know it's grit and it's a lot of hard work, but they keep doing it for so many years because when they sit across somebody at the table, they know how important and valuable the work that they're doing is. So being connected to their community and the value that they bring is so instrumental, and they have a really big purpose there. 4, the work, on top of the work needs to be done. Clients still need to be serviced, so don't let your fears run away with you. If a couple of these AEPs have been disruptive, but that just means your clients need you more. So don't make any knee-jerk decisions or reactions, and don't let your fears run away with you. And then I think this is coming up on 6, but make a long-term plan, and then with that comes, having a support system now in between when maybe you're ready to have that successorship, but you're in business, for yourself, but not by yourself. So that's what we do here at Advocate too. So that goes in hand with not letting your fears run away with you too. So those are the 6 that I took away from
Yeah,
that.
so
So thank
maybe 5 reasons not to sell and 1 tip on planning for the future. Thank you, Jacqueline. I would say, when I worked at AT&T, we could no longer grow top line revenue. And I lived in an environment where the only way to make profit was to cut costs. And so we had to lay people off every year, 10, 20%, good people, good, smart, quality people. They tried to consolidate things, and it was very, very austere environment, very, kind of demoralizing with cuts and cuts and cuts. And good ideas really didn't matter unless they were just eliminating something. Alternatively, when I worked in the wireless world, it was blue skies, sunshine, the wind at your back. We were growing the market, we were innovating, and it was just so fun, right? And so think about a business model where you own your business, you make the decisions, there's no delays, there's no layers of bureaucracy. And so these larger organizations that have other people's money, right? They have the bank's money and they have other investors' money. They're probably paying, 10 to 15% on that, depending when they got it and under what terms. But there's imagine paying, your credit cards, right? And paying 10 or 15%. And so that's draining. And then, they've got other people's money and they're putting something together to try to build value. And they're trying to make, 20, 30% profit because in some amount of time, historically 4 or 5 years, they want to sell that to the next, investor and take their money out. And so if you think about making double digit profit at those percentages and you think about the debt service, it doesn't always leave a lot of money for support, for building infrastructure, for doing those things. Maybe they have unlimited money, but typically I think you might find decisions take longer, support lessons. And so, being independent and working with someone independent like Advocate, we've been able to put money back into the business and, we're not beholden. We don't serve two masters, right? We serve the beneficiary and the agent that supports the beneficiary. And so I think that's kind of like the end point for me is that, there's just better unit economics and responsiveness here. And that's what's fun. It's a growing market. There's room for lots of people and there's lots of different ways you can go at it. So if you want to talk more about what's right and best for you, Jennifer would love to have that dialogue and we would love to help you. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Jackleen. And hope everybody enjoyed this week's edition of AHA Podcast.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.